What is going on, YouTube? We are back, week 10 of the Hook'em Horns football show. Um, Coming out of the bye week, had a few other videos that we posted here in the last few days, but covered Sam Ellinger with the Colts, and then transfer portal stuff, recruiting stuff last week between me and Shane. But again, my name is Andrew Miller, editor over at hookemheadlines.com. With me are Tarek LaCourte and Shane Black, contributors at hookemheadlines.com. We are here to preview Kansas State. Talk a little bit about how we feel about the team coming out of the bye week, a little bit about Oklahoma State, but don't need to rehash too much. I'll link up some coverage that we did for the Oklahoma State game in the description below if you want to see a little bit more there. But Tarek, it's been a while since you've been on the show because we were mostly off last week. What are your kind of opening thoughts for the week?
Well, it's a good thing that Texas had a bye week when they did. I had always thought it was a little late to have the bye week after 8 straight games. I would have liked to have had it maybe at around 6 or so. But glad that we're there. We have the bye week. It sounds like people have gotten healthy. Some of the injuries weren't as bad as we thought with guys like Anthony Cook and Ryan Watts. Looks like they'll be able to give it a go. And while that Oklahoma State loss was very frustrating because you kept seeing the same things that plagued the Alabama loss, the Texas Tech loss, and things that went back to last year, Texas still has all their goals still ahead of them. They can still make the Big 12 championship game, though that's not entirely in their hands now. They can still have a salvage a very good recruiting class, and they can still go into the offseason with momentum. But first things first is taking care of business in Manhattan. And Kansas State showed last week, as they demolished your alma mater, that they're nothing to scoff at, even with a backup quarterback. And hopefully Sark has learned that this team at the end of games needs to just lean into the run and lean into the offensive line. And the time will come for Quinn Ewers to take over games, but maybe that time isn't just yet. But luckily, this is a team that I think you can have a lot of success on the ground, and as both Roschon did last year, and the year before that, Bijan and Roschon did the year before. So those are my thoughts at this point. Shane, what do you think?
I agree with your sentiment that coming into the season, a bye after week 8 does seem a little late, especially with a 12-game regular season schedule. But kind of in the current climate of where this Texas team is at, it almost came at awesome time, a tough game in Stillwater that the Longhorns clearly didn't have their A or even effort. And I feel as if they had to get on the field next week, that's where we could start to see it, spiral downwards. But to have a week to regroup, get in the film, get a little more healthy, I think is big. And Sark has, I think he hasn't prepared to finish out the final 4 games of the regular season strong and try to put the Longhorns in the best position they can to get to Dallas. So I think that we're going to see a rejuvenated team coming into Manhattan this weekend. I'm excited about.
Yeah, I mean, this coming weekend, I think on paper looks like probably a tougher game than it will be, just because of, I had to be subjected to Oklahoma State just getting thrashed last weekend, and the way Kansas State looked, it seems like a daunting task to face them after Texas obviously loses to Oklahoma State, but transitive property does not carry over in college football. In my opinion, this game will look a whole lot different than Oklahoma State did against Texas a couple weeks ago. I guess the positive for that end is we haven't really seen Texas get blown out on the road except for one occasion. And so kind of got to hope that this doesn't turn into a situation like the Iowa State night game did last season. But I feel pretty good about this game. Getting the time to regroup. It sounds like Quinn Ewers has been making a lot of the right moves coming out of the bye week, just in terms of getting his mind right and really making some of the strides that you would hope that a freshman quarterback is able to make after a really tough road debut start. And honestly, this Texas team, and we will obviously get more into this, but this Texas team matches up well with Kansas State, largely depending on who the starting quarterback is for the Wildcats. And that's kind of where I want to go with this. I guess we'll start from the very top here. Chris Kleiman, a few hours ago, I think it was 6 or 7 hours ago, he did his press conference. He had mentioned he'd been asked about platooning the two quarterbacks or which one he's leaning toward. He obviously didn't give a definitive answer, but it looks like Kansas State is still considering holding on to Will Howard's red shirt, which means that he wouldn't play more than a handful of snaps in any game for the rest of the season. So my opinion is I know the struggles that Texas has had with dual threat quarterbacks, but I would.
So you have to I think you put Adrian Martinez a little bit with an asterisk next to dual threat because he can't really throw. It's like
a
sorry.
throwing tight end. Oh
yeah.
Yeah, I would like to see. I would personally like to see Adrian Martinez again. I know the struggles that Texas has had against dual threat quarterbacks, but Will Howard can run the ball as we saw last year. I mean, I know we handled Will Howard well last season, but I think this is a little bit different. And I don't know. I ran a stat before the game. I know it's beyond old news at this point that Will Howard has been good in his reps the last 2 weeks. But Kansas State has a little bit more than 3.7 points per drive with Will Howard leading the way in the last 2 games. The rest of the season, Kansas State quarterbacks have led them to 2.1 points per drive. That is a stark contrast. For Texas, the difference in points per drive between Hudson Card and Quinn Ewers, pretty small. It's less than half a point. So at this point, at least. And so for me, that is a stark enough contrast to say that I would rather have Adrian Martinez, especially since he's still a little bit banged up. They're not going to be fully running him. I mean, I think we saw with a banged up Spencer Sanders, yes, he picked apart Texas through the air in the second half, and Texas kind of picked apart themselves, but.
And when Watts and Cook were out, they're not the same secondary.
Yeah, that's true. Ryan Watson, Anthony Cook are maybes for the weekend. It looks like Jalen Gilbo's out. But I'd rather have Martinez. I'm just going to say it. I would rather have Adrian Martinez. What are y'all's thoughts?
I agree with that. I've said it since we did the Big 12 preview at the beginning of the season. I know Adrian Martinez was, total yards leader in Nebraska history. That doesn't change the fact that watching it for 4 years in Lincoln, at no point was I scared of him. At most points, I was kind of chuckling at some bad throws he'd made. Obviously, he pairs that with big playability on the ground, but I have been on this. I don't think Adrian Martinez good take for the whole season, and now that he's backed up, I don't think there's any real reason to get off of it. And Will Howard is a very, very good backup. It seems like Chris Kleiman's going to transition the program into his hands next season. Andrew, you mentioned the red shirt issue. Because if he gives it a full go, he burns that red shirt. That'll be interesting to watch. And I just think Howard's ability to beat Texas through the air scares me more than Adrian Martinez's ability to beat Texas on the ground. So I feel like it's karma when you ask for one quarterback over another. But if I had to pick, I'd say I'd definitely rather Adrian Martinez on Saturday.
I'm going to be the odd man out. I think I'd rather have Howard because we've, one, already kind of played Howard. Two, Howard's the kind of guy that I think Texas is good against because he can run a little bit, but he's kind of like a JT Daniels, more of a pass guy that you can kind of contain in the pocket. And Howard also is more of a run if I have to, but I'm not going to try to all the time. So that would be, I think, more suitable for what Texas does. Having said that, I certainly think that what you're talking about with Martinez makes a lot of sense, that he's banged up. Regardless of who the quarterback is, however, I think Texas should win this game because I don't think either of these quarterbacks are anywhere near as good as Spencer Sanders or JT Daniels or the guy that they're playing at Tech now. I forget his name.
Oh, Darren Morton.
Yeah, Morton. Like those are like the really talented NFL arm type QBs that I would really be worrying about testing the secondary, which is I think the kind of the weak point of the defense. Neither of these quarterbacks are going to be stretching you vertically that much.
That's true. So the next part I'm going to get into is why, like, kind of identifying some of the differences of like why I feel like Kansas State was so successful against Oklahoma State and why they won't be successful in those ways against Texas. It was pretty easy to diagnose why a lot of that happened.
They took advantage of what Texas couldn't.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean,
they have an awful pass defense and a not a great quarterback showed that. And then Quinn Ewers just chose to have the worst day of his career against the worst secondary possible, which is just irony.
Yeah, I was writing that before that if Quinn Ewers has a passer efficiency rating even in the hundreds, I know it was like 94, but if it's even in the hundreds, Texas, because that means you're either adding in at least a couple more first downs, taking away an interception, some big play that probably makes enough of the difference. I mean, there's any number of things you could choose, but basically saying that even if Quinn Ewers has a moderate game against Oklahoma State, if he has a moderate game against Oklahoma State, like a decent game, Texas probably winning that by at least 2 scores. But yeah, so
also if Michael Taff and Jaron Thompson didn't take after Blake Gideon and dropping interceptions, that could have helped too.
Oh yeah, or if you could tackle in the secondary. Secondary tackling was like one of the biggest issues in Oklahoma State. I hope no one forgets that because like that is one problem that has to get corrected or else like pretty much every remaining team on the schedule can pick you apart for that. I do want to say, like, to the point of Adrian Martinez versus Will Howard, I think this is interesting the way I would look at this. Last thing I'll say on this, because y'all are right, like a lot of this is just in Texas's hands. Like Kansas State is Kansas State. They are what they are. They do what they do. Texas is the one that you get a different version of every week, it feels like. And so, like, Texas is the one that needs to figure out these issues. But I would say if this game is in Austin, I wouldn't mind Will Howard starting. Because Adrian Martinez, I think, has more experience on the road, and I think that plays more of a factor when you can account the dual threat ability. On the other hand, Will Howard has looked really good at home. The discrepancy in his home and road stats is a lot bigger than Adrian Martinez's, and that just goes over the span of their entire career. So, but that's just a hypothetical. So, yeah, I'll move on here because we'll continue talking about Kansas State. And I want to take a look at where y'all feel like we can exploit Kansas State and take advantage of some of the mismatches that we might have, whether it's athleticism in space, just personnel matchups, or, you know, kind of wherever you feel like we can get an edge. I'll start where I was talking before of like what I saw them do versus Oklahoma State and why if they do those things that help them beat Oklahoma State, that they're going to get probably roasted by Texas if we can execute this weekend. I'll start first off. Kansas State was playing a weird modified, and they kind of are. This is kind of just the way they are now with their 3-3-5 defensive scheme. They were playing a weird modified version of like how Iowa State does, like the 3-3, like kind of the 3-3 stack. But they were playing a hybrid safety line or a hybrid safety linebacker, essentially playing 6 defensive backs against Oklahoma State on standard downs. I would say they were probably doing that on at least 70% of snaps. And it was working well because Oklahoma State already has no ground game, and they were missing their running back, who is, ironically enough, Dominic Richardson is like last in the Big 12 among starting running backs in yards per carry, but he's still extremely important to that team. And so Oklahoma State's not able to get anything going on the ground. Spencer Sanders is banged up and gets even more banged up in that game, so you're not relying on the quarterback run. So Kansas State can get away with that. You play 6 defensive backs against Texas. we saw what Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson did to an Iowa State run defense that was focusing on trying to limit them, but just couldn't. And like if Kansas State plays this 6 DB, or even if they're playing a 5 DB look, if they're dropping them deep, that's also going to be a problem. Another thing that Kansas State was doing that just won't work extremely well against Texas was taking advantage of some of the inexperience on the back end of Oklahoma State's secondary. Oklahoma State has some talented safeties and defensive backs, but they're also pretty young and inexperienced. Kendall Daniels is a good point of that. Corey Black, I've mentioned he's had some issues this season. Jason Taylor, as good as he is as a safety in pass coverage, he's not good at stopping the run. Texas has more capable run-stopping safeties, whether you're looking at safeties and defensive backs. Ryan Watts is pretty good if he's playing this weekend. If Anthony Cook's playing this weekend, Jahdae Barron is pretty sound in that regard. And if we start giving Mo Blackwell more looks as kind of like a Sam linebacker hybrid safety, like he is also a sure tackler. So I don't think that Kansas State can rely as much on just Deuce Vaughn running up the middle and just completely exploit. Like Oklahoma State, you can run the ball up the middle and have success. Texas, we obviously know that you cannot. I guess that's the point I'm trying to get to here. You can't fool the safeties by doing a bunch of these motion looks and, getting the deep ball going, dropping the safeties back, and then running misdirection. You can't do that as successfully against Texas defense. The last thing I would mention is, and this scares me to say a little bit, but Texas has done pretty well limiting opposing tight ends this season. And I think you can thank the safeties for that, but I think Kansas State does rely a little bit on 2 tight end looks, and that works again against Oklahoma State when you have suspect linebacker pass coverage the last few weeks somehow that emerged seemingly out of nowhere. And so there's a few areas here where I think Texas can exploit Kansas State if they try to run with the same quirks that they ran in their system against Oklahoma State. And so that is one of the major reasons why I feel like Texas matches up well. But I will pass it over. We'll start with you, Shane, on what maybe some.
So, yeah, what you're just mentioning about how Kansas State is just running straight up the middle in between the tackles. I thought it was interesting when I was looking into it that you wouldn't think Deuce Vaughn, who's obviously, no matter who starts at quarterback for the Wildcats, Deuce Vaughn is going to be the guy that Texas is going to need to key in on. Big play waiting to happen every time he touches it, and he's going to get his on Saturday. It's just limiting those explosive plays. But even at his stature, he's a better runner almost in between the tackles than he is outside the tackles. But when you have those big bodies up front, Keandre Coburn, Ajomo, Devondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, all those guys, I don't think Vaughn's going to have that success. I know he's not going to have that same success in between the tackles. So I think it'll be interesting to see how Kleiman and offensive coordinator Colin Klein combat that. And if they go to more, outside zone rushes, kind of like what Texas does on the other side of the ball. So I think that'll be interesting. And then when it comes to playmakers on the outside, I don't want to disrespect Kansas State, but I mean, Malik Knowles, they don't have the same, weaponry that a team like Oklahoma State brings to the table. And we talked about it on the Oklahoma State pod that even the Cowboys are kind of limited compared to previous years. But Malik Knowles and Phillip Brooks as your 1-2 on the outside really doesn't scare me that much. Knowles is like 6'3", big-bodied receiver, can give you fits downfield if our DBs aren't turning their heads around. But if we can just get our heads around, avoid those DPIs that Texas has been getting the past couple of weeks, I don't see the Wildcats being able to move the ball through the air with much success. And then if you plug up the middle, you're going to force Deuce Vaughn outside. Granted, he's very fast and shifty, but I like our defense's chances of, gang tackling and getting Vaughn to the ground. So I think, like you laid out, there's a clear game plan here. It's just whether or not Texas, Pete Kwiatkowski, and this defense can execute it, and I'm hoping they can.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One other thing I think I would add that's really, I think, favors Texas is the tempo that Kansas State plays with. They play a very deliberate, slow down type of offense. They're not going super fast like Tech did, like Alabama did at times during the game, and also like Oklahoma State obviously does. So I think that the fact that they like to play that keep away ball and like make everything slow and deliberate, I think that will help on defense, but that makes it imperative on offense when you get the ball to make sure that you're doing something with it. So I think that matches up well. But one thing that really doesn't worry me as much is the offensive line of Kansas State doesn't seem as good as it's been in recent years. They don't seem to get the push that they used to. So that bodes well for, I think, what the strength of the defense is, the defensive line with Sweat and Coburn and Byron Murphy. I wouldn't mind actually seeing if they do a little bit of what Texas A&M did, which is putting down 4 defensive linemen from time to time. So that's something else to experiment with. But I also agree with you, Shane, that I hope that they use Mo Blackwell, who's one of the better tacklers, as in some respect, and playing the safeties, I think, closer to the ball, just to shut down I think what they need to do is say, look, your strength is your run. Will Howard and Adrian Martinez, you're going to have to beat us with the pass. So that's what I would focus on. And also, you mentioned tight ends. I thought one surprisingly good part of the Oklahoma State game was I thought Jalil Billingsley played really well. He was blocking really well. He looks a little thicker. He's got soft hands. He can get open. And Sark talked in his press conference that he's not really happy about the third receiver yet. Well, for the time being, then just play 12 personnel.
Or 22.
Or 22 personnel, yeah.
Like, Keelan Robinson is like he's the highest graded running back in slot and screen receiving plays this season. And then, yeah, I mean, Billingsley, like, he was open against Oklahoma State. I think he only got 2 catches, but yeah, I mean, keep those guys involved. I wouldn't mind seeing Brennan Thompson getting out on the field a little bit either. I mean, if there's a team that we can out-athlete, it's probably Kansas State. So, yeah. I mean, if you can get Brennan Thompson down the field against Oklahoma State, they're a faster secondary than Kansas State, and probably about the same to block against. I don't know. That's kind of the way I view it.
Yeah, I would say on that point, we've talked about this, at length, that Sark likes to use. He finds his guys and he likes to use them. And this year on the outside, it's been Worthy, Whittington, and then Sanders, kind of manning the seam. Casey Kane has the third most, snaps by far. I don't understand why Texas and Sark isn't rotating Brennan Thompson, Savion Red.
And he still doesn't have 100 yards 8 games in.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. Yeah, I know. That's the problem. And obviously there have been some drops. And at some point you want to let a guy work through that. But there's so much talent behind the 3 starters that I'm not sure why these other guys aren't getting rotated in. Especially, Andrew, this is a good weekend to do it with a guy like Thompson who can just catch it and run, get him the ball behind the line of scrimmage, and let him go to work. Because that builds confidence in young players, and they also help them stick around, if they see that they're kind of future and the present.
I don't know what a Jay Hall has done, but give the guy a chance, please.
Yeah. Another one. It's why is Kane going out there? And granted, he's been a pretty good blocker, but there's so much talent in this receiving room. Give other guys a shot, please. I need to see that. We only have a third of the season left. Like,
I will say this. There have been two games that I really, really wish we had Isaiah Nair, Alabama and Oklahoma State. Because against Oklahoma State, even though Quinn was throwing some really high balls due to the fingernail issue, I think Nair would have caught a lot of those. Or he at least would have tried. Xavier Worthy, what got me about him was not that he wasn't catching it, but sometimes it was like he was just looking at the ball and like, yeah, you're supposed to hit me right in my hands and you didn't do that. And it's like, come on, man.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we mentioned earlier this year on the show, is Worthy giving up on these balls, or is he like not really locating them? I think we can now kind of say with the fact he gives up on way too many balls too early, and that's something that he's going to have to work through. And I think his freshman, what he did last year, set the ceiling so high that, you know, the guy's human. He's still a sophomore. He's going to be back with Texas another season at least. So, but that's one thing that's kind of inexcusable, just an effort play. But I agree with you, Tark.
So, I guess are we at predictions now?
I wanted to get one last thing in before predictions. I guess we can lump these together. So, because the last thing that I would be interested in hearing from y'all is, and actually, Tarek, I did want to say one thing. I like the point you made about the D line versus O line matchup, because that's one thing that I'm actually writing about right now. Is K-State is 125th in the FBS in power success rate on the offensive line. And 40.9%. And we're 61% in power success rate on the defensive line.
They're 6-2. How? Man.
So that's anyway, I want to hear from y'all, because like this is the thing that I've kind of been thinking about this week a lot, is like who's going to bounce back, because we didn't have all the many players that played all that well against Oklahoma State. So I'll start with who I think is going to bounce back, and then I'll leave it my prediction after y'all kind of lump all yours together. I think that, like, I think because he's had some nice games against Kansas State. I think this is a big week for Jay Witt. I know that's a popular name this week, but I reposted a video today. His first career touchdown was I think it was a jet sweep 2 years ago against Kansas State, and that's 69-31 mauling in Manhattan. So I like Jay Witt. That's my pick.
Bounce back is a tough term, because Jay Witt is the guy to go with. I mean, because even Worthy and Sanders both had, you know, decent games through the air against Oklahoma State. I just think I would say the rushing attack as a whole is going to put Texas over the top this weekend. I think Sark's going to continually go to it. He's not going to be afraid to, you know, run these misdirections and counters in between the tackles. It's gotten a little stale with all these outside zones. And I think if Bijan and Roshan can break through the defensive line, there's going to be space for them to run, because from what I've seen, Kansas State, which you wouldn't expect, doesn't tackle that well at the linebacker position, and even as you get deeper into
their best, Daniel Green is out too.
Yeah, so that's big.
Yeah, he didn't play last week.
Yeah,
he hurt his knee.
Yeah, I know he was injured. Okay, yeah, if he doesn't play.
Yeah, I don't think it's obviously not a bounce back with what Bijan and Roshan did last week. I'd expect Roshan to get more than 5 carries on Saturday. That's for sure. But yeah, I think they're both in store for a huge game, especially it's likely both of their last seasons, you know, on the 40 acres. So I think they're going to be the ones that kind of want to lead Texas back after, you know, a down week in Stillwater that we saw. So I say it's going to be a huge game on the ground, take pressure off Quinn, and kind of it's almost going to be like, in my opinion, build Quinn's confidence like Sark tried to build it from game one. You know, a lot of scripted stuff. Get the ball into playmakers' hands, build his confidence, and let your running backs do what they need to do. So not a bounce back, but just I think we're going to have a big rushing game this weekend.
Well,
hold on. What's your score prediction?
Oh, wait. I have to give my bounce back thing.
No. Sorry, Shane. What did you say was your score?
We didn't give scores yet.
I want to hear what Tarek has on the bounce back first, and then
Oh, okay.
I have to craft my score around what Tarek says because he's had the.
Oh God, the wig's coming out.
Yep, Quinn Ewers. He's gonna have the bounce back because that was the okay. I am president of the fan club, hence the wig, hence that's my picture on Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. But that was the worst game that he's ever played since he's ever touched a football, and the guy still threw over 300 yards. Pretty impressive. Also, Xavier Worthy, how did you drop that touchdown when he finally threw it right to you? Okay, we're going to go past that. So I agree with Shane, though. I think this is going to be heavy on the ground game. But what I think Sark is going to do is what he could have done after the first half if Quinn was throwing decent, which was turn that counter into play action, start getting it more to the tight ends, which will keep them off balance and things like that. And I think this will be a good game to get Sanders' confidence back because that drop that where Quinn put it right into his hands, I was like, oh, wow. It's like, it must be so interesting to know that Quinn played so poorly and at the end of the game actually wasn't his fault. So it's like, guys, two of my best throws were you dropped a touchdown and you dropped the ball and it led to an interception. If I put it in your hands, you can't get more better than that. So anyway, I think this will be a good bounce back for Quinn and also for JT Sanders. Bijan doesn't have to bounce back. If you rush over 100 yards and get a few touchdowns, you're not bouncing back. You're just going forward at that point.
Yep.
Yeah, he had a good game last week. It wouldn't be a bounce back.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, I mean, Quinn, worst passer efficiency rating of the season, and I found out 4.6 adjusted yards per passing attempt, even though he had a career high 319 yards. So against Oklahoma State.
What does the adjusted mean on that?
It accounts a pretty heavy weight for touchdown or for interceptions in a negative sense, and then in the opposite direction, but to about half the effect, touchdowns.
Okay.
So yeah.
Not good.
No, his second worst was around 8.6 on the year. So anyway, not very good per play there. So I'll go ahead with my prediction here, and I think my difference makers are going to be Bijan and Roschon in this game, and hopefully Keelan Robinson. I keep on harping on getting him involved, as long as it's not on that stupid motion out to the outside, throw a 10-yard out or curl or whatever that was. The guy's 5'9". Get him in. They can burst through any hole. Get him the ball in wheels and screens, and that's it. Anyway, I actually have a reason for this. If I can pull this up here, I really like what Texas should be able to do on the ground in this game. There's a lot of ways I think you can beat this Kansas State defense. And you can run it straight up the gut at them. I think we should be fine doing that. I don't count the Iowa State game here because that was just a 19-game mud pile for both those teams. In the other last three games outside of that, Kansas State has allowed 4.7, 7.2, and 7.7 yards per carry on runs through the A-gap. While they've allowed 2.5, 4.3, and 4.9 yards per carry on any other spot on the field. So, the counterplay was working really well against Oklahoma State, and I think there's a lot of ways, outside, inside zone, wherever you want to run it, wherever you want to split zone, Texas can do it against Kansas State. I haven't actually put out my prediction yet for the week, so I'm late on my prediction piece. I usually have more time to think about it. I'm going to say Texas. Man, I'm going to say Texas gets a real close one, 33-31.
Yeah, we're splitting hairs there. I have Texas 34-30. I'm looking for a big game. We talked about secondary's a bit banged up. Don't really know who's going to go, who's not. I want to see Jahdae Barron have a big game. He brings the swagger to the team for sure, and you need that, especially in a night game in Manhattan. You're going to have to create your own energy. Everyone in the crowd's going to be against you. But I think a couple big plays early from Jahdae could boost this defense, maybe an interception. We've seen him take a pick six back this year. So I think he could give a big boost to the secondary that's pretty banged up. But I'll go 34-30 Texas, and just be prepared to sweat the whole game is how I'll phrase that.
I'm going to go 38-20. I think the quarterback they're going to find a way to rate the quarterback a non-factor, but I do think Deuce Vaughn is going to play really well. He's going to find a way to get involved. You just can't shut him down completely, but here's the thing, if Texas found a way to shut down Deuce Vaughn, it wouldn't matter what anyone else did. Unfortunately, you really can't find a way to shut him down because he's so fast and he's so small. So he'll get some points, but I think eventually they'll kind of corral him. And similar to how Devin Achane plays really well at A&M, but he just can't carry you the whole game. I think after a while he'll start to wear down, and then Texas can kind of pull away after that.
I think that's a pretty apt comparison between those two backs, actually. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, Iowa State actually shut down Deuce Vaughn pretty good. He's been limited at times this season. So, all right. Well, I guess parting shots at this point. A quick answer from you guys. I don't know how relevant this is ultimately going to be, but I mean, so Texas has a 5-game winning streak against Kansas State. I believe it's the longest standing winning streak against any team in the Big 12, which is interesting. I would not have picked Kansas State if I didn't know, or if I hadn't watched any Texas football in the last 5 years. Do y'all think that winning streak? Almost all these players outside of true freshmen on this roster have found success against Kansas State to varying degrees, which a lot of them cannot say against a lot of the other better programs in the Big 12 in the last few years. Do y'all think that helps or hurts or just plays a non-factor here?
So you kind of mentioned it. Kansas State's a weird team to, have that winning streak against, because they're always going to be frisky. You mentioned at the beginning of the episode, you know what you're going to get from them week in and week out. There's not a whole lot of variability. So all it takes is like a Texas down game. So the Longhorns having beaten them 5 times in a row almost makes me a little more nervous. I would say from a player perspective, that gives them more confidence. But as a fan, it makes me more nervous. Players, I think it actually boosts their confidence. Like you mentioned, Whittington scored his first career touchdown against Kansas State. Remember Deshaun Jameson? Maybe I don't think we're going to see him returning kicks or punts, but I think he housed one against Kansas State back in 2017 or 18. 18, yeah. So, yeah, I think it gives Texas confidence, especially on the road in an environment that's going to be rocking.
Yeah. Sure. All right.
I don't know how much it factors in. Kansas State is just one of those schools that they can do everything right, and they have done it when Snyder was there and when Kleiman has been there. And it just seems to be the case, though, that the idea that if you just have better athletes, you're going to win most of the time. Texas seems to fulfill that. So, and nothing fulfilled it more than last year when literally they kept running Roschon and the Wildcat and still won the game. That has to be just the ultimate embarrassment. It's like having no quarterback, you know what play's coming, and it just didn't matter. So.
It's true. Yeah. And I mean, God knows Kansas State's got some guys that have been there for a while and have experienced this for a while. I swear to God, Kansas State's going to have people exercising the COVID redshirt year until 2026.
Yep. Yeah. That's a program that they got a lot of 24-year-olds lining up against you.
Yeah. Yes.
If I were Chris Kleiman, though, I would be trying to get one of those open jobs because I think he's kind of peaking at Kansas State.
Yeah, probably. That's interesting. Yeah, I wonder.
Go get that Wisconsin job or Nebraska or something like that.
Auburn.
Oh, that's going to be Hugh Freeze, which is going to be the ultimate irony.
Full circle.
The SEC, it means so much that we don't care.
Yeah, Auburn fans gave them some shit for that back in the day, and now, yeah.
But to refer Auburn to Texas, what I said this as soon as it happened, that Auburn treats their coaches how the national media thinks Texas treats their coaches. Because think about it. You gave Charlie 3 years and would have given him a 4th year if he had just beaten Kansas. You gave Herman 4 years after he openly defied you multiple times and was embarrassing the program in other ways. Probably still would have given you that 5th year if you were just a little bit less of a prick. So they were pretty reasonable, and I think they're going to give Sark about 5 years, no matter what happens the rest of the way.
Yeah.
Versus like they got rid of Malzahn after Malzahn led them to a national championship, beat Saban 3 times, had their recruiting going well. I mean, yeah, Auburn is one of those jobs it's not quite a blue blood. It's like one of those jobs where every 4 years you can really make a run. And that's about what Malzahn was doing. So, and then they got rid of him. Then they hired Harsin, and they basically wanted to fire him 5 minutes after they hired him. They think they should be Alabama, and they're not. There's only one Nick Saban. You're going to have to let that one go. But you laughed a little bit. You don't think Sark will get time?
I mean, it's so reliant on Arch. Yeah, 100%. I was thinking the same thing. Because, I mean, if Texas finishes the regular season 7-5, which at this point, where they're currently sitting, 2-2 down the stretch, isn't like, it's not like it could very well happen. And then next year you get another 7-5 with Quinn in his second full year. If you didn't have that Arch piece, the seat starts.
Nice.
Yeah, so I agree with your point, Andrew. That Arch factor plays a big role in his timetable.
Well, I think Texas would be at least 6-2 now if Quinn hadn't gotten hurt.
Yeah, but then it is tough because it's like you can't play those what ifs, like especially when you're doing a program like
Texas might be 6-2 if you're looking at this a different way. If Hudson Card played in Oklahoma State,
yeah, that's fair too,
or at least played the second half.
Yeah, I will say I because this opens up a whole nother You know what? I'm not even going to talk about it.
I think my friend Rod Baber said it best. If you put Hudson Card in, you start a quarterback controversy that will never stop.
Right, so, and he's a freshman on the road.
And Rod Babers would know that better than anybody.
Yes, yeah. Anyway, okay. Well, I don't know if y'all had any other parting shots that you wanted to give. Anything else before we wrap up today?
This is a must-win for Sark.
Yeah, let's dominate them in the special teams. Let's start there and build our way up. Yeah.
Because here's the thing: if they lose this game, there's not like another big road game. I mean, I know Kansas is Kansas, but like if you beat TCU at home, then people are gonna say like, okay, so you're only going to be good at home. Well, that's only going to get you like 7-5 every year. You got to win on the road. So this is a bigger game than the TCU game, I think. Although the TCU game, if you win this game, you might be playing like a top. They were 7 tonight, so maybe they could move up a little bit. Might be a top 5 team, so that would obviously boost your resume a lot. But you need to win on the road.
You do, and if you win these next 2 games, but if you win these next 2 games, you might be setting up a Texas-Baylor game that decides who the other team in the Big 12 championship game is. outside of TCU. So obviously you got a critical stretch coming up. That's my parting shot, is that I actually said it in a piece last week. I know that the sky is going to be falling for a lot of Texas fans if we go 2-2 to finish the regular season. If we go 2-2 to finish the regular season, and that means winning a road game in the next few weeks, and we look good otherwise.
How weird would it be to win the Kansas State in the Kansas game and then lose the Baylor in the TCU game? It's like,
If we lose the Baylor game, I would be kind of surprised. But
I don't know who Baylor's like Texas this year. I don't know who they are.
Blake Shapen is so hot and cold, and he gets injured, and I think people don't realize how hard it is to play West Virginia on the road this year. West Virginia's a pretty good home team. They're just not very, they're okay on the road. They're not great though. And then Tech is all sorts of wonky. Tech got blasted last week, and I didn't think that was going to happen. But
here's my parting shot. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that Texas gets into the Big 12 championship game. I don't know if they could beat TCU twice.
That's fair.
I could see them beating Oklahoma State if it's Oklahoma State, but I don't think you're beating Duggan and Quentin Johnson twice. Not with the secondary.
Well,
and not with the tempo that TCU plays at. You'd have to play really good and the secondary. And Texas has no pass rush, so that's just the game doesn't favor you.
Yeah, that's true. Come back to the whole situation. If we had one edge rusher that was good.
Yep, that's okay. We're gonna. Though, having said that, if Texas finishes 8-4 or 9-3, and A&M loses another game, I think there's a good chance you could get Anthony Hill and David Hicks. That's just my feeling.
Hicks, I don't know. Hill.
I don't see Hicks wanting to go somewhere that's not winning. He just doesn't strike me as that kind of guy.
No, but I thought he was going to OU. I don't know. Hicks is a weird one.
I also think too. I think he really likes Cale Gundy and things like that. But if you lived in Dallas and you lived in Houston, part of you is just not want to go to live in Norman, Oklahoma. It's like I don't know if I want to make this jump for 3 years.
My old roommate, one of my good friends, is from Norman, Oklahoma. He didn't want to go. He didn't want to live in Norman. He went to Oklahoma State. So there you go.
Yeah, that tells you all you need to know.
All right. Well, Shane, you got anything else?
No, that's it. I'm just it's a nervous week because with this team, it's just how it's going to be for the rest of the season. So
yeah, final month of the regular season,
which is crazy.
I think that's about all we got for today. I will be back on Saturday night for the post-game show. And then Shane, I think I talked about this the other day. Maybe we'll come back, do some sort of basketball preview before the basketball season comes up, November 7th. So we're getting to that really, really busy time of the year. But excited. November should be a good month. Hoping to God that we have 2 top 20 Texas teams still at the end of November.
Agreed.
But anyway, that's pretty much it. Again, hoping for a good result on Saturday. So for Andrew, Tarek, Shane, Hook'em Headlines.
Hook'em.